You've probably heard that Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz. What that actually means is that a country with no functional navy, no air force left worth speaking of, and a dead supreme leader managed to stop 20% of the world's oil supply from moving, not with a fleet, not with a blockade in the traditional sense, with a radio message and a few drones. Let's understand what the Strait of Hormuz actually is, 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, between Iran to the north, Oman to the south, the only sea passage connecting the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. Every ship leaving Kuwait, Iraq, Bahrain, Qatar, the east coast of Saudi Arabia, most of the United Arab Emirates, they all go through here. There's no alternative route. 20 million barrels of oil per day, 20% of global seaborne oil trade, roughly 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas, through 21 miles. In 2024, 84% of that oil went to Asian markets, the economies that power global manufacturing. They depend on this passage. Europe gets 12 to 14% of its LNG from Qatar, through this strait. This is not one country's problem. This is the global economy's circulatory system, and someone just put a tourniquet on it. February 28th, Operation Epic Fury, coordinated US and Israeli airstrikes on Iran, military facilities, nuclear sites, leadership targets, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, dead. Iran responds. Missiles toward Israeli cities, missiles toward US bases in the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain. Hezbollah launches rockets into Israel from Lebanon. Israel strikes back. The conflict expands. Fast. And within hours of the first strikes, the VHF transmissions start. No ship is allowed to pass. March 2nd, a senior IRGC official confirms what the radio has been saying. The strait is closed. Any ship that attempts to pass will be set on fire. But here's the complication. International law doesn't recognize "we said it on the radio" as a blockade. Iran never formally declared it, never notified maritime authorities through official channels, never established the legal framework that would make a closure enforceable under international rules. So the strait remains technically open, but effectively closed. Protection and indemnity insurance, the coverage that protects ship owners from third-party claims, gets removed for March 5th. The economic risk becomes too high. No insurance means one missile strike could bankrupt a shipping company. The strait gets declared a high-risk zone. Crew members become eligible for extra pay and the right of refusal. The IRGC claims complete control on March 4th. Satellite imagery shows something else. Fires burning at Iran's own naval headquarters in Bandar Abbas. A 750-foot vessel damaged, consistent with a Makran-class forward-based ship. Iran's main naval port hit. They're claiming control of the strait while their own headquarters burns. Despite everything, despite the warnings, despite the attacks, some ships still tried. 17 oil tankers continued through the strait in those first days. The Pola turned its AIS transponder off, a common tactic to avoid detection, and managed to deliver its cargo to the UAE. The Athanova attempted to cross, got struck by 2 drones. The Stina Imperative struck twice in port. The Safine Prestige struck. Crew evacuated. By March 4th, at least 8 vessels damaged. The ships that made it through did so silently, gambling that they wouldn't be the next target. Some won that gamble. Others didn't. Now watch what happens when 20% of the world's oil supply becomes inaccessible. Brent crude, up 13%. European natural gas nearly doubles. South Korea, 9 days of LNG remaining. Iraq, shutting down oil fields because storage is full. Qatar Energy, halting LNG production after facilities attacked. Saudi Arabia's Ras Tanura refinery, the country's largest, hit by drones. Operations suspended. The ships that can't move. The oil that can't load. The gas that can't flow. All of it backed up behind a 21-mile passage that Iran says is closed and the US says is open and crews say is too dangerous. Container shipping companies, Maersk, Narvri, CMA, CGM, Hapag-Lloyd, suspending transits. The Houthis in Yemen announcing they'll resume attacks on Israel and commercial ships in the Red Sea. The Suez Canal route becomes dangerous too. Ships reroute around Africa, add weeks to transit times. The entire global shipping network adjusting around one choke point. Let's go back to the question no one asked publicly. Why would Iran want US naval escorts in the strait? Dan Marks, Middle East specialist at the Royal United Services Institute. Convoying ships is really difficult. It requires a lot of naval assets, and it will tie up the naval assets they have out there, and it is expensive. But expense isn't the main risk. The main risk is exposure. US warships moving slowly through narrow waters, escorting commercial vessels that can't maneuver quickly. Iranian submarines that might still be operational, Iranian missiles along the coast, Iranian drones that cost a fraction of what a US destroyer costs. One missile gets through, one ship gets hit, one body bag comes home, and the entire operation becomes politically unsustainable. That's the trap. Iran doesn't need to win a naval engagement. They just need to make the Strait costly enough that the US either escalates further into a ground war no one wants, or withdraws and accepts the closure. The Vietnam comparison isn't accidental. Draw a superior force into terrain where it can't use its advantages, inflict just enough casualties to shift public opinion. Wait, but there's something the strategists might be missing. The crews. The International Transport Workers Federation and shipping lines are meeting, the International Bargaining Forum. They're expected to endorse the Warlike Operations Area designation. Here's what that means in practice. Seafarers on vessels sailing under flags of convenience, which is most of the global fleet, get formal protection to refuse voyages through designated areas. They get substantial bonuses if they choose to go, but crucially, they can simply say no, and this will be a significant obstacle to the restoration of services through the Strait of Hormuz, because the people steering those ships, they're mostly from India, the Philippines, countries that supply labor to global shipping. They see what happened on the Skylight, the MKD v. Wyom, the LCT Aye, the Stina Imperative. They know crew members died. They know more could. And when the designation changes, they'll have the legal right to say, not me. The US can offer escorts, can guarantee protection, can station the entire Navy in that 21-mile passage. If the crews won't sail, the ships don't move. So who wins when the Strait of Hormuz becomes impassable? Follow the oil. The United States is now the world's largest oil exporter, largest LNG producer. Qatar, the world's third largest LNG exporter, has halted production. Facilities attacked, operations suspended. That creates a gap, a huge gap, about 10 billion cubic feet per day of LNG gone from global markets. Western gas exporters like ExxonMobil, Cheniere. They're positioned to fill it, but here's the catch. US plants are running near full capacity. Most cargoes are already locked into long-term contracts. New production coming online soon, maybe 2 billion cubic feet per day, far short of the 10 billion cubic feet gap Qatar left. So prices rise, everyone pays more, but US producers capture some of that increase. Then there's Russia. Russia's shadow fleet, the tankers operating outside normal regulatory oversight, moving oil, despite sanctions, they're still moving. Russia is certainly benefiting from the loss of Saudi and Iranian crude, making it to markets and will increase the flow of crude exports to China and India. But how long can this last? South Korea has 9 days of LNG, 9 days before reserves run low, before the stabilization fund starts buying on spot markets at whatever price exists. Europe has storage from last winter, but that storage is depleting and winter will come again. China has strategic reserves, but those reserves are for emergencies, and this is starting to look like one. 21 miles wide, 20% of the world's oil, and the Strait of Hormuz sits there, technically open, effectively closed. Because that's the thing about choke points. They don't need to be completely blocked to stop working. They just need to be dangerous enough that no one will use them. And on February 28, 2026, someone made the Strait of Hormuz exactly that dangerous, with a voice on the radio, and the world is still figuring out what to do about it.